joined in. I'm a part of the.
Sorry.
Today's the 20th. I don't even see it.
Oh, Good. Here? Yeah, I did it this time.
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Right.
I'm sorry. Joined.
You ready?
Ready.
Sure, all the council members. I apologize. We have our new system. We're still learning it, so if you wouldn't mind bearing with us. And thank you. I apologize. Our sessions, our closed session was really long, so apologize that we're starting this study session a little bit late. So I'm going to call the study session to order. And City Clerk, is there confirmation of a quorum?
Mayor Gilmore confirming a quorum.
Thank you. So tonight we're going to be talking about an overview of City Place, the Santa Clara project located on 240 acres north of Tasman Drive. And before we start, I just wanted to give a little background of this project. This is a long-awaited update for us. We haven't talked about this in quite a while. So a little bit of the history. Back in 2013, we signed an exclusive negotiating agreement with the related company. It's hard to believe it was back in 2013. We approved the project in 2016, and that was after dozens of community meetings and city council meetings. So that took place. We had a lot of input from the public, a lot of input from various groups and the community in that approval process. We had a lawsuit filed against us by the city of San Jose, which slowed us down a little bit, but we won the lawsuit, so we're very happy to report that. So now we can proceed with what will be considered one of the largest and probably the best developments in the history of Silicon Valley here right in Santa Clara. Right, Steve Eimer? I think, yeah, thumbs up. So the city council had the vision and set the direction for City Place, which will be a big part of Santa Clara's future, especially on the north side, and especially based on the fact that it's a landfill and the city does own the land. And we can charge really, really high rents on this land.
Whoa.
So we're really happy about that. But now it's time for the related company to execute the documents, execute the project, and this is, again, the first update we've had in quite a long time. So we're very fortunate to have one of the most premier developers in the country here, and they're our partner in this. So I look forward to tonight's presentation and a really successful groundbreaking in the near future. So city staff.
I'm going to pass this off to Ruth, who's going to speak quickly and get us through about 60 slides.
Thank you. That's about a slide every 10 seconds, Ruth. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll try and be fast. Good
Thanks.
evening, Mayor and City Council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. So as the Mayor just outlined very specifically about what we're going to cover tonight, we do want to provide you with a brief overview of some of the actions that were taken that leading up to the project approvals in June of 2016, so that we could set a baseline, if you will, about the actions that need to be taken on a going forward basis. But before I do that, I want to see if Steve wants to say a few words on behalf of Related and before we start the presentation. And so, Steve?
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Ruth, Mayor Gilmore, members of the council, Steve Eimer with Related Companies. I was just recalling with others that it's been more than 5 years since I started working with the council and members of the staff on this project. I think I had blonde hair back in those days.
We all did.
Yes,
Yeah.
at least I had more hair. And it's been, as you outlined, Mayor Gilmore, a year and a half, better than a year and a half since the project was approved unanimously by your council. And we are so excited to be at this point in the process today. Our entire team from New York and our California team are really geared up now to move forward with the project. We're looking forward to working with city staff and with the council and other city entities to really move this project forward just as quickly as possible. So in the interest of time, I'm going to break it at that, but I will be here to answer any questions you might have of me later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So this presentation, as the city manager mentioned, has quite a few slides. And so also with me tonight is Anna Shimko, who's been our outside counsel from Burke Williams Sorensen. So just as an overview for the presentation, we're just going to go over a little bit about the project, remind the public about what the project is and some of the plans and phases that we're looking at. The approvals that the city took in June of 2016. What were some of the key points of the transaction itself? And what were the fiscal overviews? What did we expect that we would be gaining from this project from a fiscal perspective? And what are some of the other obligations associated with the overall transaction? And then what are our ongoing efforts? So just briefly on the project, we want to remember that it's a public-private partnership. So the city is providing the land and the developer is providing all the sweat equity and the money to develop the overall project. We look at this as a regional retail and entertainment focus. And of course, one of the main objectives was that it was going to support the city's general fund. So this is a program overview of the project. It's really, this slide is a little hard to see, but the total program is 9.2 million square feet, of which about 5.4 million square feet of office, 1.1 million square feet of retail, residential units of about 1,600 residential units, hotel of about 700 keys, and food and beverage and entertainment. So this project can't be built all at once. So the concept is that it'd be a multi-phased project with the first phase starting on the south on the former Tasman lots. One of the things as we go through the transactions we might want to remember is that when we started off 5 years ago with Related didn't actually have control of most of phase one. We had an ENA with the Montana Property Group, and then along the way, Related and Montana joined forces together and formed a joint venture for the better part of the city center part of the project. And so now we have one integrated development, which will serve us all well. So the first phase is about 873,000 square feet. That particular phase we'll go over a little bit more, but that one of all the phases are better defined. One of the things that we wanted to point out at this point is that the phases are, although they're numbered 1 through 7, that the phasing can be taken out of order. We do anticipate that phase 1 will start and then phase 2 will immediately follow, but if there's an opportunity that comes up and that there's a great office tenant out there that's interested in a corporate campus, we might be able to accelerate phase 5 and do that before we do some of the other phases. So the marquee part, if you will, of the overall project is the city center. It's a mixed-use portion of it. It's a mixed-use project that has focus on retail, entertainment, food, and beverage. And so the first phase is the Gateway District at about 873,000 square feet. And then the balance of the project is the city center is about 3.15 million square feet, and it's broken up into different districts. And one of the things to highlight here is that related, we'll have a master architect for the overall project to make sure that things are integrated, but yet at the same time, the same master architect is not going to be designing all the buildings. That there will be a number of architects involved so that we get variation in look and style and feel. So the first phase is the Gateway District. This will be along Tasman. They look to develop a cutting-edge office, have a hotel, some food and beverage, and then possibly a residential component. You can see on the slide that when I go through the districts about where in the city center that the districts are located. The next portion is the Station District. It's the second phase that will come on board. It's going to be heavy entertainment and restaurants and retail. The boulevard then is just a little further north. We get a little bit less entertainment in that area, a lot more retail, open and public spaces. The hotel district in this particular slide is, let's see if it is in this area in here. So what this perspective picture does is it gives you a look at the station area down here, and then moving to the boulevard in this area, and then the hotel district here, and then in the back is the residential design district, which we'll look at next. So this is the residential design district, retail and lifestyle residential focused. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna Shimko. She's going to talk a little bit about the approvals that we've taken, and then after that, then I'll come back and talk a little bit about the DDA and the fiscal.
Thank you. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you. My hair is still blonde, but it requires a bit more maintenance. So as you may recall, in June 28th, 2016, very great day, you certified an environmental impact report and approved the requisite general plan amendment and zoning, which includes the master community plan and the infrastructure master plan, approved a disposition and development agreement to govern the transaction going forward, and a development agreement to vest the project approvals. Shortly thereafter, the City of San Jose filed a lawsuit challenging the environmental impact report that we felt had been done in a very comprehensive manner and above and beyond adequate. And that view was shared by the trial court. As you know, we won that case in November of 2017, and yet, because San Jose did file an appeal, the very ably led city team, kudos to that city team, was able to help negotiate a settlement agreement with San Jose to make that go away. We can go into detail as much as you like about the terms of the settlement agreement, although I think you're pretty familiar with them, that there are traffic payments or payments for traffic improvements which must be accomplished within the North San Jose area, which is beneficial to Santa Clara as well. There is an initial $4.5 million payment, and after that, there are subsequent payments that are due. However, they can be credited, get credit for both the amount of money that the developer will pay for transportation improvements in San Jose, as well as credit as to the third potential payment for housing that is approved and built in the city of Santa Clara. There are good faith efforts to be made on both sides, the cities of San Jose and Santa Clara, in terms of working together on housing in North San Jose and working with VTA to make this project a reality. The good thing, one of the good things about the settlement, yay, is that it allows the project to proceed and means that we are no longer in a force majeure period. Under the disposition and development agreement, the CEQA lawsuit caused force majeure to exist, and there were, at the same time, a number of other force majeure conditions, not as long as the CEQA litigation, but due to some regulatory delays getting certain approvals. But that has now all been resolved. We hope we don't get more force majeure periods in the future. So there have been a total of 500 and change days of force majeure. So the schedule of performance is being changed such that we'll go over it in a bit, but as to phase one, the outside date for the developer to submit the phase option notice saying we want to go forward with phase one, here are our general plans for phase one, is December 13th of this year. And the outside date for submitting the development area plan is April 15th of 2019. The ground lease would have to be conveyed no later than April 14th, 2019, August 14th, 2019. And the outside date for the start of construction is 2 years later. In terms of the environmental impact report, very briefly, the EIR studied the project and a number of variants because, as you know, the approvals were of a project at a fairly conceptual level. The market could change, the precise location and formulation of the development is likely to evolve over time within the confines of the approvals that you have issued. But there were a number of variants studied. There were a lot of less than significant impacts after mitigation measures to be implemented. And there were 4 areas where there are significant impacts that will not be mitigated: jobs, housing balance, biology, air quality, and transportation. And for that, you adopted a statement of overriding considerations. In terms of traffic, the developer will have full responsibility for improving or causing the improvement of 28 intersections within the various pertinent jurisdictions and will make a fair share contribution to 45 intersection and interchange improvements. The developer will also make a voluntary contribution to VTA in order to fund regional freeway and transit improvements, and that voluntary contribution is made over time as the development comes in. It was built into the per square foot fee that was calculated when the approvals were done. The city is in the process, and Ruth will talk about this a bit more later, of preparing a multimodal improvement plan to address the CMP intersections within the city of Santa Clara where there will be unmitigated impacts as a result of the project, so that you would approve and ultimately VTA would approve the plan for offsetting improvements. The transportation improvements on site, this is all refresher. There will be a relocated Stars and Stripes, an eastbound Tasman Drive slip ramp in order to get over to the site. Avenue B would be new. Also, Avenue C would be new with a connection to Tasman Drive and a possible left turn out of Avenue C, as well as an expanded bus loading area. There has been discussion with VTA and the developer and the city about transit improvements. The master community plan does contain the possibility of each of these future, at this point somewhat speculative, but future Great America Station area improvements. And the master community plan acknowledges that the development that the developer will do on the adjacent parcels, that this could bleed into those and it would have to adapt to the station area master plan as things move along. This is a flow chart of the entitlements overall, the discretionary approvals. The ones in green are the ones that you have already approved. And the ones in blue are the ones that would be coming up. So you will be looking in the future at tentative subdivision maps. That'll be fun for us lawyers because it's a little bit of a different tentative subdivision map because it goes horizontal and vertical because these are airspace parcels. So that gets somebody like me kind of excited. And you will be looking at development area plans in terms of what exact uses are going to be developed on the site for each phase and the architectural treatment, et cetera, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And then obviously there will be plan check and permit issuance standard protocol in order for development to proceed. The master community plan lovely document here is really the zoning for the site. The site was rezoned to Planned Development Master Community when the entitlements were granted and the Master Community Plan was approved. Again, it really functions as the zoning or a specific plan, call it both. It contains the conceptual development framework, but also extraordinarily detailed design guidelines, development standards. It makes very clear that where it says shall, it means you must, and where it says should, it means you ought to, but you don't have to. And it's quite detailed in terms of how the project is going to proceed. It contains the permitted uses, the conditional uses for each of the phases, and the procedures that will be followed for approval of the development area plans as they come forward on a phase-by-phase basis. There's also a preliminary infrastructure master plan that addresses the myriad elements of infrastructure that will be forthcoming. So the MCP contains these very basic land use areas and defines the uses that are allowed in each of those areas. This is, I believe, Scheme A, one of the conceptual land use plans within the Master Community Plan. The MCP addresses the street network and what the different types of streets ought to be, what's public, what's private, describes in general terms the bicycle and bus transit network, landscaping, parks and open space. Of course, there will be parks and open space throughout the entirety of the project. The open space other than the city park is to be developed by the developer as they proceed with the associated vertical development, and the developer will maintain all of that open space. The city park on parcel 3, as you recall, is somewhat different. Related will ground lease parcel 3 at a certain, we now call it phase 2A, at a certain time correlative to the takedown of phase 2A, and Related will pay the city rent on that. We'll construct the access road to go into the park in a place that we both agree that it ought to go, and then we'll reconvey the land to the city, as well as providing $5 million for park development. And at that point, the ground lease that was associated with that parcel will be reallocated to the other parcels within the development. About $500,000 of the $5 million can be given to the city upfront for soft costs. And other than the $5 million, the city will need to determine and identify the funds to develop the park if $5 million is insufficient. And of course, we'll have to determine what the design of that park would be and the uses in the future. I was running through the numbers today in terms of timing, and if the outside dates are what is followed, we all hope that the outside dates are not what is followed, it would probably be about, it could be 10 years before you had, from now, before you get that park back. So you have some time to think about that. And it might not be. It could, hopefully it would be a lot sooner.
Be my 70s, okay.
No way.
Dominic will still be young. Oh, he's not here to hear my joke. Okay.
All right. So the development area plans, before the developer takes down any phase, a development area plan must be submitted that is consistent with the MCP, and the MCP provides very particular protocols, timing, and procedures for the submittal and the approval of development area plans. Really, basically, we created a separate zoning construct that applies to the approval of the development area plans. It reflects the unique nature of the project and the public-private nature of it. There is to be an executive project clearance committee, which would be the city manager, the head of the community development department, and the head of the other city departments, and a priority project manager, which is a position to be funded by the developer and directed by the city. It can be either a city employee or a third-party consultant that basically shepherds the development area plan as well as other elements of the project as it moves forward through the process, make sure that everything gets done in a very timely manner, that the comments of all the departments get consolidated and they're consistent, and because the timeframes really are relatively short. Essentially, within about 6 months from submission of a development area plan, it needs to have gone through the Executive Project Clearance Committee and to the Planning Commission, and then to you ultimately for approval. The procedures specify that the architectural materials, your kind of design review, architectural review component, can be done at the time of the development area plan if the developer has that specificity level locked down. And if not, then the architectural materials can be submitted after development area plan approval and would go through the planning director, and I believe appealable to the city council if the city council wishes to call it up, and appealable to those within the immediate vicinity of the project to the city council. When a development area plan is submitted, there are going to be a lot of things coming your way, both a narrative of how the MCP is complied with, and then a lot of detail about how this phase meets the development obligations. And that's more important in phases 1, 2, and 3, where you have the minimum development levels, the best efforts development levels. There's a tenant leasing plan. We have to get information from the developer on the efforts that they've been making in their leasing and how they're coming along with the plans and whether they're going to be able to meet the milestones that have been set forth in the transaction documents. The first development area plan will contain a signage plan for phases 1, 2, and 3. And at the same time, we would be doing the tentative subdivision map. We already talked about the architectural materials. The infrastructure, one of the key elements at that point is to make sure that the infrastructure that's planned is correlated to the development that's in the development area plan, so that everyone is comfortable that the right infrastructure is going to be present before the development is opened up in that particular phase. There will be information on what open space is going to be at that in that phase, and make sure that it's correlated to your code requirements for open space. And we get a report from the developer as to how that particular phase relates to each of the mitigation measures, and a traffic analysis to show how much traffic is going to come from that particular phase and how that matches up with what was studied in the EIR and the mitigation measures, as well as I mentioned, a retail plan and leasing plan, and a financing plan, and a number of other things. As I mentioned, the infrastructure master plan has generalized plans, conceptual plans at this point for the various infrastructure elements, and those will be matched up to the development at the DAP stage. The development agreement, as you know, a development agreement vests property entitlements, and the development agreement in this case does vest the density and intensity of the uses that were approved in 2016 for 30 years. It provides that of the housing units that will be developed, 10% of those units will be affordable, even if there are new city standards that would require more, because in 2016 you negotiated this particular agreement at 10%, it would remain at 10%. And the development agreement addresses the rate and types of development fees, with most of the fees staying as they are for 7 years from the first development area plan. That's in order to provide an incentive for early development, and traffic is treated a little bit different. We'll talk about that. So the developer will pay for the maintenance of all parks except for the city park, City Place Park, and will pay for enhanced public services such as if there is street maintenance or repair of streets that's necessary due to settlement of the landfill, or there are costly improvements that are put in, enhanced light standards beyond what you would normally do, or they want street sweeping 5 days a week instead of your normal one, the developer will pay for that. And as you well know, the project will also fund the construction of the replacement of fire station number 10. Before phase 1, there must be a temporary fire station if it is necessary, and that has to be done by the certificate of occupancy for the buildings in phase 1. And then there needs to be a design for the permanent replacement fire station before phase 2 infrastructure starts and before the first building opens in phase 2, the permanent fire station must be ready to go. In addition, the city is to conduct an independent study on what is necessary in order to make sure that there's adequate fire protection for the project, given that it is a former landfill. And if it turns out that there are enhanced services, fire services that will be necessary out there because it is a landfill site, then the developer will have to pay for that up to 4.5 full-time equivalent positions and 1 piece of equipment to cover that. In addition, the project will pay for enhanced police services, such as services on evenings and weekends, and there will be an annual security plan and review done jointly by the city and the developer. We briefly touched on housing, but the ability to develop housing on the landfill only comes about through a variety of approvals from the regulatory agencies. As you know, some of those approvals have been granted. They are conditional, so there are a lot of things left to work through, but we are all quite encouraged by virtue of the approvals that have been secured to date. And 10% of the housing developed in city center or in City Place has to be affordable at least a moderate income level. It is expected and acknowledged in the development agreement that affordable housing can come in phase 2. So it can be basically backloaded with phase 1 being market rate. In terms of traffic and transit issues, the local traffic fee that you have will remain capped for the later of 7 years or until half of the office development is complete. And after that, the fee amount can increase up to an amount that's about 2.25 times your current rate for the local traffic fees. Similar to other development agreements within the city of Santa Clara, there is a regional traffic fee that was negotiated. It's $1 a square foot for office and 50-cent a square foot for residential. As mentioned, the project will make a voluntary contribution to VTA and construct mitigation measures and make fair share payments for transportation improvements. The local and regional traffic fees paid by the project can fund the measures that you will be approving under the multimodal improvement plan that is being prepared. So in addition to using the local and regional traffic fees, the developer and the city then would share equally in any costs above that, up to a total of an additional $8 million. So when you run the numbers, the developer's maximum obligation is about 17.4, with the city's maximum obligation, the city's obligation at $4 million, such that any multimodal improvement plan improvements above and beyond $21.4 million would be borne by the city. So you'll probably want to keep that in mind. And in terms of plan check fees and development fees, as I mentioned, those are frozen at the current rates for 7 years. The developer is responsible for all third-party costs of consultants, environmental, fiscal analysis, legal costs for the priority project manager, et cetera, and that's all quite clearly laid out in the transaction agreements. And now I go back to Ruth.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Really jogged all our memories from so long ago. Thank you.
So in addition to the development agreement, which vests the entitlements for the project, we do have a disposition and development agreement. This agreement sets forth the terms and conditions upon which the city as the property owner will convey the property to related through ground leases. So some of the key points in the DDA include the phasing the uses, schedule performance, what the minimum development is, the rent and rent escalations, who's responsible for rent on the infrastructure, and the terms and conditions for them to actually get control of the land through the ground lease. So on the minimum development, on phase 1, which is the first piece on the south end of the project, the minimum development is about 600,000 square feet. If you recall a little earlier, the projected development on that particular site is about 873,000 square feet, but this sets out, again, the minimum. On phase 2, the minimum is 700,000 square feet. Right now, we think that is actually going to be about 2.4 million square feet. The developer does have the ability to carve up the phases into some smaller development sizes, and they may decide to do that. But for the purposes of the DDA, the minimum square footage on the second phase is 700,000 square feet. There's a minimum amount of residential units and then a minimum amount of retail as well. So that when I say retail as well, I mean that's inclusive in the minimum development. So on the beginning annual rent, so on the first phase, as soon as they take it down, then they'll pay $750,000 a year. And then you can see then the rent schedule that follows. So all of the rent has been pre-negotiated as far as the starting rents at the time that the lease is taken down. So phase 1 is treated differently from a rent perspective than all the other phases. So let me start with phase 1. Over time that we will continue to get increases. So we get an annual increase of 3% per year. However, there are other bigger adjustments along the way. So there'll be a 10% adjustments in years 25, 35, 53, et cetera. And then there are 3 other fair market rent adjustments over time. So we'll take a look at the values. We'll take a look at the means upon which we agree that we're going to value the property, and then readjust it to market. And there will be some floors and ceilings. But this is a way for the city to keep up with its value over time. So the reason why phase 1 is separate from the other phases, is because it's not on landfill. So the phases 2 through 7 are principally all on landfill, and so that the way that the rent was calculated was just a little bit different. So the main construct is the same, where we'll have a preset starting rent, and then we'll get annual adjustments of 3% per year. Along the way, that there are certain intervals where we'll get a bump of a 10% increase during any of those 1 years. And then there are 2 fair rent adjustments in year 45 and year 70. And these 2 rent adjustments take into account the enormous investment that's necessary in order to build onto landfills. So there were extraordinary costs associated with to stabilize the site, to build on the landfill, to secure the approvals, et cetera. So the preconditions to a ground lease include having the development area plan approved, having a report out on the tenanting efforts, their financing plan, having all the landfill approvals done, CC&Rs complete, and then submittal of a construction schedule. So the way that the DDA is constructed is that they can take down and have control of the land through a ground lease in advance of actually constructing. There are many other development projects that the city has had where that we wouldn't actually convey the ground lease until the construction was ready to start immediately thereafter. This particular transaction is different, whereas the developer has a 2-year period to actually start the construction. So, but having said that, they have to start paying rent from day one. So as soon as they get the ground lease, they pay us rent, but they don't actually have to have active construction for another 2 years later. And in order for them to start construction, they would need to submit, they would need to have all their permits in place, have a detailed financing plan, and then provide us with the security. So as Anna alluded to earlier, we've had to adjust the schedule of performance because of the force majeure of the lawsuit. And so just there's a lot of detail here, but the only things I really wanted to point out is that the phases 1 and 2, those dates are pretty much set. They don't float as much as the other phases. And so the outside date for the phase option notices for phase 1 is December 2018, followed 1 year later by the phase option notice for phase 2. So as far as the fiscal overview, so if you may recall in 2016 that there was an analysis provided by Related, and we had a companion analysis, a peer review done by our consultant. So the average rents over the term would be in around the $9 to $14 million range. And then based upon the analysis done in 2016, that we estimate that at full build out, the tax benefits, so this is tax benefits alone, in a $16.9 million range. There's significant tax benefits to the other taxing entities as well. And if we pulled out just one, which is Santa Clara Unified, the project is likely to pay them about $22.1 million a year. So the overall tax benefit to the agencies is going to be dependent on the timing of the development, the market forces at the time, and the types of land uses that they actually build. So some of the impacts on the general fund, whereas we are getting a lot of benefit through the ground lease, and we're getting a lot of tax benefits. There are some basic services that the city provides with any property owner or any development. So I wanted to highlight a few of these. So on fire, the city will be providing some basic fire service, just as if there's another building that's built in somewhere other part of the city. We provide basic fire services. So those services would be we would provide that to them, to the project. However, as Anna alluded to earlier, if the landfill proves that we have to have additional services to cover hazmat and to monitor the site because the landfill, then those costs, after a study is determined, we find out how many staff we might need, and then those costs would be funded by Related. For basic services on police, most of that would also be covered by the project. However, because there is so much mixed use and very intensive use of retail, entertainment, and food and beverage, it's likely that there would need to be augmented services being provided out to the city center area. So at the time, we estimated that there would be probably about 8 full-time equivalents for police officers needed for City Place at a cost of around $2.4 million. On Parks and Rec, there would be, as Anna mentioned earlier, all of those costs associated with the parks on site would be paid for by Related, but the city does not have the plans developed on the 31-acre city park, and then those maintenance costs would be the city's responsibility. So the general fund costs for public works, fire, parks, et cetera, are about $1.3 million for the project. So here's a chart that we showed earlier about the net revenues that just from the anticipated taxes associated with the project, and that we look to be gaining about $16.9 million in net revenue at full build out from the project. So let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing and what we are continuing to do to bring this project forward. So as mentioned earlier, we have a lot of work that we've been planning for and are embarking with VTA. We have the multimodal improvement plan, and then we have the transit station. So a little bit about the multimodal improvement plan for a second. This plan is because we've had impacts on the congestion management program intersections, the CMP intersections. And so that the staff has been busy working on developing the improvements that would offset the impacts associated, not directly offset, but compensate, if you will, for the impacts associated with those intersections. So we have a list. Assistant City Manager Manuel Panetta has been working on this project as well, and we have a list of 4 dozen or so projects, maybe more than that, on the potential multimodal improvement plan. That project list and budget will be brought forward to the BPAC, and then it will be brought forward to the VTA committees. So after that, the project list and the general budget have been vetted, then it'll come back again, and it'll circle back through a process. It'll go back through the BPAC. It'll go to the City Council for approval, and the package of the MIP would include the improvements itself. If we have a nexus study that needs to go along with it, so if the package of improvements are beyond what we think that the funding allocation might be, or there might be impacts that other projects that might be take advantage of particular improvements in the multimodal improvement plan, we may look at creating some kind of impact fee or nexus study for projects besides City Place that can take advantage of the MIP. So after all of that, the packaging is put together again, BPAC, then to the City Council. Then after that, it would go to the VTA committees, and then finally for the VTA, to the VTA. The VTA then board has the ability to either accept or reject the plan. They don't have the ability to tweak our plan. Moving on to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So the regional board has approved our wastewater discharge requirements, our WRDs. However, that the WRDs is a conditional approval, as Anna said, and it has a lot of work efforts associated that we're working through right now. One of those things include getting the operation and maintenance plan with the landfill, so that they really control what's happening with the landfill. On Cal Recycle and the Lead Enforcement Agency, or the LEA, they really look at the methane collection system. So as that system is modified or redone in certain areas of the project, that they will be actively involved. And actually, they are still actively involved right now. We have close coordination with them. They've been knowing what we're doing for the last 4 years, and we'll continue to keep them informed and involved. We have to amend our permit with the Division of Drinking Water. We're going to be putting in new potable water all over the project, which will require an amendment to our permit, and that is ongoing. With the water district, some of the access requires crossing the Santa Masakino Creek, and so we're working through with the water district approvals to allow for that to happen. Similarly, with the Corps of Engineers and Department of Fish and Game, that working on creeks and the wetlands, and PG&E on the along Lafayette, as we know that there's a large PG&E easement. We are looking at building 2 bridges across Lafayette. One is a major bridge, which will carry a lot of vehicular traffic, and all of that needs to be vetted and approved by PG&E as well. So some of our internal ongoing efforts include staffing plans. We've been having a lot of discussion with Related about how we go about processing their plans when they come in, and the support that the city staff might need over time. We've been working very diligently about a temporary relocation site for Fire Station 10. Want to make sure that that there is no loss of service in the area, so the temporary station is critical in order for the project to start. In addition, we're looking at the permanent location for the Fire Station 10. We're preparing for our right-of-way needs, and what that means is that currently the current Stars and Stripes will no longer exist in its present-day location. When the project is built, Stars and Stripes will move further north, and we are looking at preparations to accommodate that movement. We've been talking a lot about the construction access and staging. So how do all the pieces fit together once they start construction? Because the first piece will be along Tasman. So how does that impact access to the soccer park, access to the stadium, access to the train station? And then, of course, we've got day-to-day coordination. So the steps to the groundbreaking. I know we're all excited to the groundbreaking. So what does that mean? So the first thing is that the phase option notice needs to be delivered to us, and then the city manager would accept the phase option notice. And then after that, then they would submit their development area plan, and that starts in the planning process. Then after it moves through the staff side, it'll go to the Planning Commission for review and approval, and then after that, it would go to the City Council. So on the ground lease, that these are the steps that would need to be taken. You need to have a landfill operation and management agreement. We need to clear all the title issues. We need to look at and get approvals done for the construction of infrastructure. So there's a lot of things that logistical things that need to be done in order to accommodate the phase 1 groundbreaking. And then to accommodate the actual, that was the lease conveyance, and this is the construction itself. So specifically as far as what you'll be seeing in the future, the multimodal improvement plan, the development area plan, tentative maps, public infrastructure, which would include possibly some roadways or right-of-way, like I talked about it just a little earlier. We've talked with the developer about CFDs, whether or not that might be a tool for them. The gas collection system, because we will continue to remain responsible for the methane gas collection system, and to the extent that there are changes that need to be made or contracts that need to be let, that those things would be coming in front of the council. The project requires a new substation before it gets to in the phase 2, phase 3 timeframe. That, as you know, that's a long lead item, and so all of that, it's a SVP's facility, so all of that would be coming through the city council. Any moves related to the fire station would be coming to the city council, and of course the huge effort associated with the park, with the 31-acre park, would be all in front of the city council. So that's it, and we are available for any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Thank you for that very thorough presentation. Members of the council, are there any? Teresa O'Neill, here we go.
Okay, thank you. So one of my questions has to do with, there's still a very substantial amount of retail space that's outlined in the presentation. And as we're all seeing, the world of retail seems to be changing by the minute practically. And, so I was wondering if there's been any additional thought done, or is it too early considering this time frame as to what the retail environment might be like? Are we still thinking, originally we were talking about some kind of like flagship department stores, or are we looking more at smaller, or, are we looking at, what are we looking at now that, every time we turn on the news or whatever, we hear of another store closing?
So You are absolutely correct. I mean, the retail industry is evolving and evolving very quickly. And some of the concepts that we had talked about in front of the council about a huge department store may not serve anyone well on the longer term. But having said that, that because the concepts are changing quickly, Related is in the forefront of that with all of their retail across the country. So that right now that they are looking at what the tenanting might be like, what concepts might work, what is looking forward, and as we mentioned a little earlier, that part of the process is kind of what is your tenanting plan, so that they're in that formulation stage right now. And I know, Steve, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but I do know that they're in the formulation stage of about how the concepts are going to work and fit together, and that we'll hear a little bit more about that as they're finishing up, looking at those things, as well as how the physical structures fit together and what kind of environment that we're all collectively looking to achieve. But yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, the building of the traditional department stores is not probably we're not going to probably see that here.
Great. I have another question.
yeah.
So my other question, I don't know if it's Ruth or somebody else, or obviously I'm very interested in the transportation part of it and the whole, I got a chance to take I had a preview peek at the kind of the spreadsheet of the multimodal plan today. And one of the things that I'm very interested in, because I think it will really help this project, is and I think the funds are perhaps being allocated to VTA, but is the really looking at what can we do to develop that station there so that we can maximize the potential to have workers and visitors coming to the site via Amtrak, Capitol Corridor, and perhaps quite expanded ACE system, working on the light rail capacity there and buses. And I know in the plan there was, looking, and then there's also all the current corporate shuttle. So I was just curious as if there's any discussion that's gone on with regard specifically to that multimodal station and the impacts on Tasman.
So the multimodal improvement plan does set aside some funds for the overall station plan. And the idea would be that we take a look at that station plan and how it integrates with the overall City Place project. And that, so there's a lot of effort looking at how that interface might happen and how it might, how the project and the train station can have a kind of a seamless transition, or have it be transit friendly. To the extent possible. So that part of the project is more in our control than the actual station itself. And the station itself is really not a part of the City Place project, although that we've included in the multimodal improvement plan as far as the planning part, because it does have an impact on the overall development. But on the station itself, whether or not that there's an expansion of rail service or what kind of service might be provided, that those are other agencies and that part of their planning process and what their vision is of the future. One of the things we are accommodating is, like I said, in the seam, if you will, is like all the transit buses, because we know that that's an existing condition and it does serve a large, broader community. So one of the schemes that you saw up there kind of looked at what might make sense as far as accessing the station and providing that staging for all those little shuttle buses that go all over the place. Having said that, however, that there are certain improvements within the project that would benefit that shuttle system to get out onto Tasman, and so those are the things which would be the Avenue C, and those are the things that are a part of ongoing discussions with VTA, because they do have concerns about how that integrates or interfaces with the light rail. But I think that we're all trying to do our best to figure out how the two might work well together, but yet at the same time, we look at how it fits with the project, and the transit agencies are looking at how it fits with their transit operations system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Watanabe?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Ruth, Anna. It was really a nice reminder because just listening to all the details that you added in, it's hard to believe that we did that 2 years ago. And just more importantly, what I'm glad about is the fact that it's going forward, because I keep getting questions from the community. When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Yes, it is going to happen. But so this is really exciting. I hope a lot of people are paying attention, and frankly, I've thought about even the pause, that we've had. Maybe it was like a blessing in disguise, because if we had gone ahead and we're building, all this retail, at least now we can adjust and make sure that this project really is the best that it can be, for our community and for the area. So thank you again, and look forward to putting the shovels in the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other members of the council wanting to speak. Do we have any cards from the public, City Clerk? If you'd like to speak, please come forward, any member of the public. Okay. Good evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. Thanks so much for allowing us to speak. I know it's late. So I hope that part of the plan, since it seems very, very young in the design elements, and there's also a lot of approvals, that you really encourage the use of parking reuse. There seems to be a fair amount of parking that will be required, especially with an entertainment destination, an entertainment district right off the highways. It's one of the few times I would probably advocate for more parking than less, given
We're going to put that on the record.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
It's videoed.
But I would suggest that you look at how to reuse that parking infrastructure should the time come when we don't need it as much as we do today. Or in the near future. Also, next generation transportation mobility options, looking at how those are being integrated, including ride sharing, zip cars, electric bikes. How is that really being embraced in this project? And then hopefully the local tech companies that are here. There's been some unfortunate news with Uber with an accident, but that is bound to happen. It'll continue to happen, and I don't think that should be something that should stop us from planning on how autonomous vehicles and mobility solutions are changing over time. And I really hope that this is a project that'll be around for decades, hopefully even longer than that. And we need to be looking at that time horizon. We're not looking at a 5-year time horizon or an 8-year time horizon. We're looking at a century time horizon here. So what can we do to look at what's happened over the last 50 years, what's going to happen over the next, and hopefully that you can really encourage the development community to support that. Just know that your local community here will help support that as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, City Manager, do you have any?
Just as closing
Parting
comments,
comments?
we recognize this was a long PowerPoint presentation. This sets the foundation for starting the project in a new phase. And we wanted to make sure that the documents were available publicly so that if the public wants to refer back to them, they're available and transparent in terms of next steps in the phases of the project. So thank you for allowing us to present a very lengthy PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you. So that PowerPoint presentation will then be put online, so we can also refer back to it as needed. All right, thank you. I know you have a tough road ahead with just planning a new city within a city and the staff resources it's going to take for this. We appreciate that. We look forward to working with the developers and all the consultants and everything else, and placemaking our development out there and our city park. We look forward to that as well. I also want to make one introduction if people don't know him. Mr. John Elwood, if you'd please stand up in the audience. This was a gentleman that contacted myself and another council member, I think about 7 years ago. Thank you, John. And brought the City Place project forward for us. So thank you so much, John. We appreciate it, and it's nice to see you're still involved in this. So if that is it, we'll close this study session. And if it's okay with the council, we can, oh, yes. Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break and we will start the council meeting. Thank you.
Good job. Short break. Commercial break.